we on? Check one, check two. Do you guys know why my computer freaking out? Because it's not hooked up to the monitor. It's kind of shutting on and off. Maybe I'll wait before I shut it down. So, anyhow, welcome. I know that's not what you came to hear, which was some inside stuff because it was talking about outside stuff here today. But one of the things I was thinking of talking about first today is how many of you are familiar with double harmonic minor scale? You might know of it like as the some people call it Hungarian minor and stuff like that. And so how many people are familiar with it? Hi, Peter. Yeah, so there's one of these things when we were talking about playing out, what's really cool is to add some chromaticism, basically some wrong notes to your right notes. And how many of you all do those? I'm actually going to start by talking about that double pentatonics and double harmonic minor package you've got there. So, and do all of you do these double pentatonic patterns, which is you take two forms of your pentatonic scale and put them together? And if we could get that monitor going, that would be sweet. But what we do is take two of your shapes, the 5 pentatonic boxes, put them together. Again, how many people do those shapes here? Julian, you do them. Peter, I know you do. There's a really great match between double pentatonics and double harmonic minor. And that's what this package is kind of talks about. And, what you have are... there's basically these intervallic structures that come from the scale, and let's put a groove on. So with like our double pentatonic patterns, what we have is basically there's a lot of times the scale's oriented into a major second and a minor third. And there's if you think of the top strings, there's this nice spot on the, it's kind of like, well, if I was doing F, it would be the 13th fret, this pattern, and that one at the 11th fret. These are really great for, again, how many of you don't do these? Just so I know, do you all play these patterns, or do you all not? Just how many don't? Okay. Okay, so that's great. So you got these patterns. So now, what really integrates well with this is this double harmonic minor scale, and it has this really cool shape, which is, it's like a half step in a minor third. So it's like your pentatonic pattern, and you'll see a bunch of these in here. I also think there's a link to the video on here that's on YouTube. And you're adding in that half step below your basic pentatonic pattern. And it's just like your double pentatonic, except we moved it up that bottom note in the pattern of a half step. There's a counterpart to it up top. So this is your standard double pentatonic pattern, like if I'm doing F at whatever 13th fret. All right. We'll get the same double harmonic minor scale, and by the way, it's a double harmonic minor scale. So if I stop this, the scale that I'm playing is. So 1, 2, flat 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, flat 6, 7, 1. That pattern, yeah, that's what that scale is, but we're using the flat 6 mode of this, and it can have all kinds of interesting names. The math of it is actually an F. It's F Lydian sharp 9 sharp 6. It's really a kind of blues scale. It's 1 sharp 9 3 sharp 4 5 sevenths. But it sounds really cool if you take those half steps and put them on different strings. And again, like I was saying, it's just 2 notes away from your double pentatonic pattern. So these guys have been always like, because how many of you are big on 3-note to a string patterns? You know, so that these are really great for playing fast. So let's try it. Let me try it better. Let me see if I can do a fancier one. Sorry, 1 second. One more time. So now, double pentatonic, double harmonic minor, back to the double pentatonic. Somebody could type that up, that'd be awesome. And you hear how it's got, when you go the double harmonic minor, it's got that nice chromatic sound, right? So it's a really nice balance. Like after you shred, you're like, done. So after you're tired of doing the right thing, start doing the wrong thing. It sounds fresh, right? You always mix it up with normal stuff. So I'm mixing it up with like Dorian or blues, right? You know. So I won't be talking so much about the Dorian or blues stuff, but that's what the, you know, you got to bring that stuff back in. So that's where what you do. Section in the scale down, you know, I think you'll see some patterns for it down in like 10th position. So we can do the same stuff again. So that gives me, that's sort of a nice place to sort of open up, sort of warm up here. And then, you know, one of these things, since we're a small group, oh, by the way, I was wondering if we could get this thing going, and I'm wondering if my computer's freaking out because it's not, this isn't working. It's kind of going on and off. Is this working? Anyway, any questions about any of these? I put up a bunch of subjects, and I've got stuff to talk about right now, but anybody got anything in their mind that they had a question about? Or otherwise, I'm going to talk about some augmented stuff. Okay, cool. Let's talk augmented. How, you know, when I think of augmented, you know, it's symmetry at the major third. And there's like the classic scale, you know, for augmented stuff is what? Whole tone, right? You know, that's your sort of classic, you know, typical thing. And I used to not, when I was a student, when I was like 18, I was studying with Mick Goodrick. Mick Goodrick was like, whole tone's stupid. So then, years later, I came and heard, Wayne Krantz doing some amazing whole tone stuff. So whole tone's really cool, actually, and there's it's really important for your chromatic organization, because what's really cool about whole tone is you've got only two whole tone scales, the one you're on and the one you're not. And one of the things we're going to talk about today, that's beautiful. I was right. It was freaking out because it wasn't plugged in. I was seeing my computer was going blank, flash, blank, flash. So there we go. Never mind the mother cord. Oh, by the way, you want me to detonate the mother cord? Okay. Do we have audio?
Here, let's see. Yeah, it still should work. I guess the audio is not working at the moment, so
we won't work. Never mind about the mother cord.
Let's go.
You all hear about the right whole tone scale all the time, but one of these things I learned from George Garzone here is the wrong whole tone scale. So how many of you have used the wrong whole tone scale? So in other words, it's the scale that doesn't have one in it. and it's this one. If you look, I've got the right one, which is, 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, sharp 5, flat 7. But the one, if you like rocking out and for fusion stuff, sometimes what's a really cool one to play is the wrong whole tone. And the wrong whole tone is the one that, in this case, doesn't, I'm going to analyze it. I'm analyzing this relative to A minor. So I take my C whole tone and I get a flat 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and flat 9. Very weird, but what it does is it's that flat 3, 4, and 5. That's part of your pentatonic scale.
Oops,
sorry. So let's say we've got an A minor chord happening. And I'm going to use the wrong whole tone scale. I'm going to play a C whole tone over an A minor 7. Because this has a bunch of notes that are correct, actually. And what's cool is that I've got my flat 3, 4, 5. And then I've kind of got a group of the wrong notes. 6, 7, actually 6, 7 can be for melodic minor. It's really only the one wrong note is the flat 9. But what this gives me is an in, out, in. This is going to be a big thing about out. The one thing about outplaying I can say. It doesn't matter really what you do as long as you start inside and then you go out and don't stop when you're out till you get back in. Because if you stop when you're out, it's a mistake. If you stop when you get back in, it could be cool. Especially if it happens on beat 1, or you can actually feel in your gut when it needs to resolve. So I'm actually going to do this lick here that I have written for a 2-5, but I'm going to do it I'm just going to do it for one chord. For A minor 7 here. And I'm going to go, So here's my whole tone. In, out, in, out. Or rather in, sorry. In, out, in. nice sound right to it. And again, it's an interesting idea of using the wrong whole tone. The thing about whole tone is no matter which one you use, there tends to be a group of notes that's in your scale and a group that's out. Another thing that this is a shape that I'm going to talk more about with augmented scale is arpeggiating, a particular like arpeggio shape for augmented. Which is this. And what we're going to do is, this is just, by the way, one of these things is augmented triad sounds really awesome. Again, like, because of my Mick Goodrick post-traumatic stress, it's like augmented triad. You got to do something more. It's got to be augmented major 7. But actually, again, like I've heard, in particular, I can remember John Marasco, who just passed from the guitar department. Anybody know how to work this thing? Part. He used to use augmented triads and arpeggios. They sound really fresh. And here it is. And what I'll do is to make it inside, I'll sort of resolve to my A. Where is it? Where is that thing? What ends up happening is one of the things that I'm sort of skipping over here is that we want to, and this you'll find in your 251 handouts. What you really want to do. What's really helped me out is memorizing these upper structures, and augmented. Augmented comes from like major, not from major scale, from melodic minor and harmonic major. You get augmented triads in there. So you're not going to look for them in your Dorian in your Lydian. You're going to look for them in your Lydian flat 7. So they happen on the flat 7, and if it's on the flat 7, it's also on 9 and sharp 11. And then for minor major 7, it happens on the flat 3, and that's what I'm talking about here on this other sheet where I'm playing over A minor and I'm using C augmented. So so the C augmented in A minor gives us flat 3, 5, and natural 7. So like a minor major 7. Where'd you go? There you are. 2. Okay. And one of the things that I haven't written out yet is that for outplaying, I like to go what I call go skating in augmented triads, and I'll start moving these in half steps and fourths and just different intervals, and it can sound really cool. I kind of got this idea from Krantz. Let's say going maybe a little double harmonic wire. So that just that good old augmented triad is really fun to run around with. How many of you are familiar with augmented scale, which is a very similar scale? I think of augmented scale as you take whole tone scale and squash it. So when you have whole tone, you have a whole step. So let's squash that whole step into a half step, and we will now get this augmented scale. And it's what would we say? Its intervallic formula is like minor second, minor third, or we could say minor third, minor second. Used by Meshuggah, also big in animals as leaders. And very strange, very cool scale. Very, and again, here's another thing about like where you want to know your upper structures, because you take your formulas from this list over here. Where's my? Is it there it is. So you take this list over here, and it's sort of because it's got that same C augmented triad in it. It works very similar to whole tone, except there's a really cool arpeggio in here that relates to that augmented triad I was doing. This is going to be augmented major 7, and we're going to repeat these because this augmented scale is symmetrical at the major third. We're going to repeat augmented major 7 in major thirds, and it's a really cool geometric shape on the guitar because it's actually I should. Maybe I should. We'll see if this doesn't crash. But it's you can kind of see it from the tablature. It goes major third, major third, major third, and minor third. So you get this really cool. It's just like the shape I was doing before, which was like major third, and then stretch major third. Now we're going over minor third. And I'm going to add this note that's not in the scale, A, because I'm going to use it over an A chord. That's why, right? So now, I'm going to take this thing. This is a very normal lick. This is Stairway to Heaven. So this idea of using C augmented major 7 for A minor is right there in the second chord of Stairway to Heaven. And that chord is C, E, G sharp, E. And it makes an A minor 9 major 7. Now I'm going to go through those other guys. And then, again, like what I'm saying, it might seem really weird, but the shape is so friendly on the guitar. And a lot of guitar players do this. I started doing this before I knew it was a part of augmented scale. I just knew it was a cool shape that I liked how it looked on the neck. So now I've got this awesome shape, and it's a really fun thing. I could go skate with it. Actually, before I go skating with it, I'm going to actually go look at another scale quick. Before we go there. Down here on the bottom of the page are the things I call the Meshuggah zones.
That's probably getting annoying. Let me see if I can get my grids to work. It worked.
Here are the shapes, by the way, about the augmented scale, how it works. It's got some really cool stuff. You could play, this could be how you could do whole tone. That's one of the fingerings a lot of people don't use for whole tone, which is 2 notes, 2 string. Over here on the whole tone page, there's 2 little whole tone licks I forgot to talk about. This is a really cool way to do this. That shape up there, the 2 notes, 2 string thing, but to do it with whole tone and augmented. And this is like, I don't know if you're familiar with those Berklee patterns, but this is. Nice sort of like thing. Now I'm going to do it for the augmented scale. Now the same guy. What am I doing? That's the augmented major sevenths. Right? Now, and then, but then the Meshuggah zones. There are these two regions up near the top strings. Because the scale is symmetrical at the major third, it really is fun to play this scale on your G and B strings. So you'll see in Meshuggah, you'll see with Al Halsworth, you see with everybody that they tend to play off of the major third strings, the G and the B, for these patterns. So you'll get this stuff. Or they'll do this one, which is putting the minor seconds on the top, minor seconds on the bottom. Now, where did we see this pattern just a little while ago, but on the top two strings? It was in the double harmonic minor. The same shape. Let me prove it to you. What am I doing? And this is the trippy thing about this chromatic stuff, is you start seeing all of the same shapes sort of repeating in different contexts. So you see here, I've got this section and this section. See, there's your half step and two minor thirds on the top two strings. Guess what we see again? We go to augmented. Same shapes, same two shapes. This time, they're on the G and B strings. So what it is like in augmented scale, that this interval combination, minor second, minor third, repeats in fourths. But in augmented, what's it repeat in? Thirds, right? Major thirds. So it's real trippy, and you're going to keep. The more we look at these weird symmetrical scales and kind of polytonal ideas, the more you'll see the same sort of interval combinations, but sometimes they'll be repeat at the minor third, they'll repeat at the major third, or they repeat at the fourth, or the tritone, or the fifth, and it's it's kind of like, it's almost kind of dizzying and beautiful in a way. But yeah, so this ties in my brain. I'm like, hey, that is very similar to my. Very similar to my what did I call it? The augmented double harmonic minor. A little more of this. Now I'm into harmonic, double harmonic minor. Now in the augmented scale. Back to Dorian, right? So again, I can sort of, it's like those shapes are really super cool, right? Then we go to the next level, which is, you might have heard this, Al Halsworth talks about this double augmented scale. Some people call it triple augmented, because now we're going to go up and we're going to have 3 half steps in a row. That's what the scale looks like if you play it on the neck. There are a lot of shapes to it, but it looks like... And I don't know, I'm not going to search for the shapes on this, but I can update this here. Well, anyhow, from this double augmented scale, I was talking about that skating idea, which is just sort of freely improvising with these triads, moving them up and down in half steps and different intervals. This is a good example of it. This is actually not free. This is in the double augmented scale. I have the intervallic, one of the intervallic formulas for it up there. It's just we're sticking another augmented triad on the augmented scale. But this will give you a good, nice way to move freely with these augmented major 7 chords. You got. Where am I? I want it a little faster. And then, the lick. Really, so that's what I'm doing is just that same lick I did before, which but in this scale, you can actually do the same lick a fourth apart. So I play a C and an F, then an E and an A, a G sharp and a C sharp, and then back to my C. Now I can go skating with these. Maybe I'll move them in tritones this time. Now I'll just start anywhere on the neck with it. And that was that wrong whole tone into some normal stuff. Now a little Meshuggah. Double harmonic minor. Double pentatonics, right? Double harmonic minor. Augmented. Major 7s. Double augmented. So then, so you start. What's good about the patterns is they sort of, they're in the scale and all that, and they help me when I try to go free with this stuff because, this stuff is so sort of out there to begin with. The idea of just sort of playing anything is not a big leap from this kind of idea of what we're doing here is we're playing polytonically in major thirds. So this is related to Coltrane's 3-tonic system. So, because there's 3 keys of augmented triad apart, which, by the way, makes a triangle in the circle of fifths, right? What shape does a diminished 7 chord make in the circle of fifths? A square. Anyhow, I'll do this. You can look at Pat Martino's stuff if you want the crazy shapes in the circle of fifths stuff. Anyhow, so that's something. Any questions? Yeah, Peter.
So you were playing in what chord?
I'm playing over A minor 7.
Yeah.
And
If you want to play through progression, does this work?
okay, here. Forgot to practice this one today, so I'm going to do this on the fly. But here's 2-5-1, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that list of my upper structures, to try and place these augmented major 7 chords within the context of 2-5-1. So when I want to use it on the 2 chord, that's the A minor 7. So it's like I'm going to use my C minor major 7, or C augmented major 7 chord for A minor. Why? Why is that happening? There it is. Because C augmented major 7 is flat 3, 5, 7, 9 of A minor. And that's what I have. Don't get freaked out by the different key here, but I have in my head the most common substitution. If you have a seventh chord and you want to use it as a substitution, is to go up a third diatonically. And that's what I call 3, 5, 7, 9 substitutions. And they're like the coolest arpeggio, 7th chord arpeggio, sort of the play over a chord, basically, because you sort of drop the root, you add the 9th to it. So that, and then I'm going to be like, well, then we get a 2 chord, we get a 5 chord, right? So it's a dominant chord in a 2-5-1. We're going to end up with D7. So what are we going to use? I'm going to use augmented major 7 on it again. So I go to my list, go to my altered dominant, and I'm like, where is that there augmented major 7? And it is on, and I don't want to I will get into this probably later. Altered dominants technically, what's another name for altered dominant? Superlocrian, right? And it's called superlocrian because everything's flat. So really that 3 in your altered dominant, mathematically speaking, is a flat 4. So put augmented major 7 on flat 4. Nobody calls it flat 4. They call it what? 3, right? So it's one of those things. But mathematically, and I'm going to talk about, I'm obsessed with these 13th chord arpeggios. And so in order to understand, when you arpeggiate this stuff up to the 13th, it kind of makes more sense to break it up as I have here. So long and short of it is augmented major 7 appears on the 3rd of altered dominant. And if you go to there, it's, if I play my set, let's say I've got, this says C7. So I play C7. And then over that, I'm going to play E augmented major 7. How should I do it? Yeah, this one. Let's do this one. Sorry, but it actually sounds pretty good for altered dominant, right? Right. So that means I'm going to go for like the scale that has the C. And do you have all the handouts for this? Yeah, okay, cool. Sorry, I just want to make sure I made plenty of copies for everyone. So then I'm going to use the augmented scale that, which is going to be basically, what did I say? E augmented, augmented scale for that. Then for the 1 chord, I'm going to use a G augmented scale. Why, Norm? Why? Because G major 7 is diatonic to your augmented scale. So in other words, if you look in that formula there's a 1, 3, 5, 7. So I'm going to use that G augmented scale, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the E altered dominant. I'm going to use a G sharp augmented scale. And then I'm going to play a 2-5-1. Hopefully this doesn't sound too terrible, because I haven't practiced it. But sorry, try it. Sorry, one more time. There we go. stuff, because otherwise it sounds like you're from Mars the whole time. So, like, you know. So that's the, you know, so again, the important thing is to balance it out with some normal stuff. Otherwise, people think you don't know what you're doing necessarily. You know, if it's too much out. But yeah, so that, Peter, so that's putting it in a, you know, really traditional chord progression, like, you know, 2-5-1. Any questions about anything? Because if you've got anything that you've been thinking about or anything, you fire away. I've got plenty to talk about, so it's not like I'm going to shorten stuff. Peter?
So you were actually thinking about different scales to use when different chords happen.
And yes, so, and it's weird. So this is one of the things. This is a great question. Like, so what's going on here is, like, we have a chord with, let's say, D7 altered. So it's like, okay, I've got a D7 altered. I'm going to think that's melodic minor, and that melodic minor scale, you know, D altered dominant, that is E flat melodic minor. Its third mode is Lydian augmented, and that has the Lydian augmented scale in it, right? So then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I could then use the E flat augmented scale also contains the same arpeggio, E flat major 7 sharp, E flat, or sorry, what was I saying? It would be a G, what did I say? G flat augmented major 7. So that, which is F sharp. So, so I'm going to use that. So I'm going to say, you know, I sort of match the augmented scale up with that mode of melodic minor. That's what I'm trying to say. So right. So it's that flat 3 mode of melodic minor has an augmented major 7 chord. So it's like, oh, I could go off on my augmented scale here because it's in there. And then what am I doing? I'm actually kind of, right now I'll play the, you know, the F sharp augmented, followed by the B flat augmented major 7, followed by the D augmented major 7, and then finishing it, and that's why I was doing it in 16th notes, so that my last arpeggio would be the one I started with, which was that F sharp augmented major 7. And that's the one that's diatonic to, you know, to the D altered dominant. Right, so it's all lining them up. Then I'm like, you know, yeah, so does that make sense? Yeah, you know. The first one, I'm lining it up actually with a melodic minor. That's, you know, and you might be saying, well, why use melodic minor when it's a minor 7 chord? And I would tell you it's done an awful lot. Like, I could show you over in this. It's a very traditional bebop lick. It's on the last example of the, actually, this is the one I like better. This is in the diminished scale. It's very common to play major 7 over your, let's say an A minor 7 chord. If you look here on that A minor 7, you'll see, and this is an anticipation too, this G sharp and that G sharp. This idea of going, let's say, you know, that's a very common bebop lick. So that's going 7, 1, 2, 5, 3, 1, 2, 7, 1. It's very common to use 7. It's not really a chord tone. It's an approach to. It's an approach note to 1. You can think of it that way, and that's a similar thing you could think about with the double. with the double harmonic minor. Those chromatic notes are just chromatic approaches to one approach is 5, one approach is 1. Anyhow, but it's like, so it's, so that's one of these. It might seem sort of weird that I'm using I should use really C major 7 if I look at my list. If I look at my Dorian, if I'm using a 7th chord starting on the 3rd, a flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, it should be that, but I'm using the natural 7, and it's because it sounds cool, actually. Sometimes you can use melodic minor where Dorian is, especially if you want to do something different, which is, it's not like I'm saying Dorian's bad. So there. So does that make sense in terms of how lining up the scales and I have to, I think modally, and then I have to see where my crazy scale, my augmented scale, intersects with my normal scale, in that case melodic minor, or Dorian. Okay. Again, any questions? I won't go too much over the hour, but there's a couple. If you want to know one thing, since I gave you these packages, the one thing I'm absolutely 2 things that I'm totally obsessed with. I'm obsessed with loops, and these arpeggios here go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. 13. God, I lost my A. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. But what comes after 13 would be what? You go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, 13, and then 1. So it's circular if you keep going with the thirds in this stuff. So I'm really, you could check out for if you want something to use, get your hands on these arpeggios. Look at the bottom of.
It's basically
These arpeggio shapes here for 2-5-1. We'll say, I'm gonna need some stuff. Yeah. What I'm doing is using these 13th chord arpeggios over a 2-5. Actually, I don't have it in here. I have a 5 of 2 there. It's very, there's a lot of jazz lines that you'll hear it as a. As much as I hear this stuff, and I do it myself, whenever I hear you guys do it, I'm always like, wow, that sounds so cool. And what we're doing, what's really interesting about this, there's a little secret, Well, there's this funny thing about alter dominant and Lydian flat 7, that they're the same scale. In this case, I could look at this as a G. I'm hearing this as G alter dominant, but this analysis up here is Lydian flat 7. And there's this, it goes back to that super Locrian thing where alter dominant, when you analyze, it's kind of messed up because of that flat 4. All these other scales really break up really nicely into 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, except for alter dominant. And one of the funny things is when I look at the structure of it,
Here, I'm on the right sheet.
it makes more sense when you start the arpeggio from flat 5 than from 1. Because if you start from 1, you actually get a minor 7 flat 5 chord, if you literally break the scale up in thirds. You start from the flat 3, you get an E flat minor 7. But if you start from flat 5, you actually, Lydian flat 7 starts all over again, and it's, for your 2-5 voice leading, it's answered a lot of questions about what's weird going on in jazz 2-5-1 playing when I sort of put this into practice. It's like, so, I call it the tritone flip-flop. When you say G altered, I might say, that's D flat, Lydian flat 7. You say D flat, you say sub 5, flat 2, Lydian flat 7. I'm saying that's 5-7 altered. And I'm constantly flipping. I call it, again, the tritone flip-flop. I'm going back and forth with it. And it's really, this is one of these early examples of like what we've been talking about all day today, which is basically this polytonality. So this treatment of the 5 chord in jazz, sometimes it's a 5, sometimes it's a flat 2. And it's actually the same thing, it just depends on what the bass player is playing, basically. But I really encourage you to, these arpeggios, again, like really help me understand like so much of the way piano players think and how upper structures work and all of this stuff, because you're doing the whole scale in thirds. The last thing I'll just gonna say quickly, I usually talk about this every clinic, is these or the cycle of fifths. And again, any questions or anything? Yeah.
So do you combine this kind of material with like more traditional way?
Yes. So, or which things? The out stuff, or that 2-5 stuff one? The out stuff, yeah. So here's, and I'll give you just sort of example. This like here's cycle of fifth licks, which are actually, what we're talking about doing is going up in fifths. So like F, C, G, and keep going like that. But the way you end up breaking it up on the guitar nicely, it goes. This is actually that top line. It's a really nice pattern for playing the cycle of fifths. And in order to make them more musical, I will flip every other fourth. So instead of going, I'm going to go. And for any of you, are any of you familiar with those Bergonzi books? The Jerry Bergonzi Pentatonics book. This is his pattern he does in that book, which goes. It's more of like a sax player, piano player type approach to the pentatonic scale, as opposed to Jimmy Page, right? So I'm applying that. So I could use this. Here's an idea that I could start off by using it for a vamp type group. And now I'm going to play this lick here. based on or and I'm going to mix up the notes. Right, so now, so this is like sort of like weird out idea right now, but what I could do is say, hey, I'm going to use that. I did a little mapping out, and here I'm going to use that descending lick over a 2/5, and it kind of, and a lot of these notes, if you place it right, will actually be right with the chords. So I try and match up the tones, you know, like so that I get a good bunch of the notes are in the key before it goes out. And that's what. I'll see if I remember this one. So anyhow, that might sound sort of out there, right? But you get the, you know, it kind of works on one. And let me play some normal stuff first. Anyhow, you get the idea with that. Now I'm going to try some freer stuff too, like. That's better. It was a little bit better in terms of integrating, right? Yeah, more modern approach.
Yeah, and do you think this kind of approach can like combine with the traditional way, like Jim or Jim Paul?
And the thing, what we'll find, and it's like, you know, it's like those arpeggios I was talking about. What you'll find. This whole thing about those 13th chord arpeggios came from this lick from Donna Lee, which goes, you got that little lick that goes, I was like trying to figure out what the hell is going on in that thing. And what it is I realized that if I took that lick and took it to its extent, that this first part, this was flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, and then to like 9, flat 7 of my D chord, and then to 9 of my 1 chord. I was like, hey, if I take that to furthest extent, so that I'm going to go, instead of stopping at 9, at 11 and 13, the same thing with that. And that's where, so like a lot of times the old school guys did all of the out stuff, all of the strange stuff, but they would do it in little tiny bits. You'll see it in there. It's like, and some of these crazy ideas go way back to like the 30s and stuff. You know, Duke Ellington's orchestra and stuff. They'll do really cool stuff, but it'll be just like this much of it. These days, we like hang out, like, you know, woo, yeah. We're like hanging out on the outside, like, and it's like, but the old school thing was much more like they do a little quick thing. And you'll hear that cycle of fifth stuff a lot of times at the end of a tune. Piano player, like really, you know, traditional piano players will do, you know, they and then they'll have like listen for that, like a lot of times, and they'll do this little cycle of fifths lick, over the top of it. Mike Stern does this lick in his version of "Softly as in a Morning Sunrise." That's so it's they're out there. But again, like I would say, is like you see all of this, all this crazy stuff in the old stuff, but in much smaller doses. And the other thing the jazzers that were using this stuff, they were listening to the granddaddy of this stuff's like Debussy, and because that he pioneered the use of like whole tone and diminished scale, and he used a lot of pentatonics because he was really into jazz. So there's a lot of feedback between the French Impressionists and jazz players. And then this cycle of this stuff connects with Schoenberg and the 12-tone system, because this is actually 12-tone. We're doing 12-tone improvising here because the first 12-tone row is the cycle of fifths. It goes through all 12 notes before you repeat something. So I really like using a freer approach to this, and I'll end here like. So here's this cycle of fifth stuff. So I can take the pattern, and I can go free with it, and that's this lick. See, groovy lick 3. Just if you're listening, I want to take it a little slower. So I like using this stuff, loosely too, right? And there's an example of sort of, because one of the paradoxes we just said, the cycle of fifths is a 12-tone row. So how do you play it anywhere on the neck? How do you play it differently? Well, what scale is it? The chromatic scale. So therefore, if I say play it here, you could be like, it's all the same thing because it's everything. So, and if you jump around in the pattern, if I go off a half step or something, I'm just moving around in the cycle of fifths and to different points, in the chromatic scale. So you know what I mean? It's sort of like a holistic way of looking at. You can see everything as all scales of kind of one scale that you're sort of just jumping around in. And just so I'm not just talking out talking out of turn, I should say. What's really interesting, I'm just going to close with this, the cycle of fifths. If you take every contiguous 7 notes in the cycle of fifths, spells a Lydian scale. So F to B is F Lydian. If we do C to G flat, which is really F sharp, that's C Lydian. Go to the next one, G to D flat, which is C sharp, that's G Lydian, and so forth. So the cycle of fifths is actually a picture of all 12 keys, kind of like a dial, where every 7 notes that's next to each other is a new key. And it's so you can think of that when you're playing the cycle of fifths, you're just kind of moving around in all 12 keys. And I could, this is one of these things, I could go on and on forever, but I can see people are getting tired, and we'll maybe wrap it up here. I'll talk about the cycle of fifths more next semester if you guys are around. I do this once a semester. So any last questions? Yeah.
How do you practice
So number one, patterns. You know, I am like, patterns are like the least fun thing to do until you see your friends do them better than you do, and then you really want to, this one really wants to practice patterns, okay? So that they get your hands on it. And I am singing this stuff. So when I'm here, boo, 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 da, boo, and the way I learned to sing this stuff wasn't by being a good singer. I was singing what I play on guitar, but this gets it in my ear. So now, ba-do, 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 and I have this theory that when you hear it, you can actually play anything and people will believe you, because I can say and now I'm playing flat 9, major 7, and flat 5 over a minor 7 chord, right? But because I'm hearing it before I'm doing so that's one of the things, I think, like, getting it in your ear, and you have to spend some time on these to get used to them. I have a lot of students that will play, and I didn't talk about diminished scales, usually where I start with this, but I have a lot of students that play the coolest sounding stuff in diminished scale. I'm like, how does it feel? And they're like, feels terrible, because they're not expecting what's coming out. And anytime I'm playing guitar, I don't care how cool what I'm playing is, if I don't expect what the notes that are coming out, if it's a surprise to me, that's a bad feeling, because we really want to have a good sense about what we're, expect what we're, the notes that you're coming out. So give yourself time to absorb these into your ear. And that's what I'm saying about the singing stuff is really, really great for it. I don't do it on gigs, but because nobody wants to hear me sing. But anyway, but it does a lot of good for me, in terms of getting it in.
When you like play changes, what you do is you take the chord and you find another chord from the same chord scale and using one of these.
Yeah, and like with when I had this pattern, I don't have any scale. I just have the 12-tone or the cycle of fifths. But what I did is I picked this group of notes from the cycle of fifths, and if you see in there, I have my fifth, root, flat 7, 11th, and flat 3 of the A minor 7 chord, which is there's a connection to pentatonics and the cycle of fifths, which is just like those Lydian scales. But so I picked a set of notes from the cycle of fifths that were diatonic to the A. Then there were a bunch of ones over the D flat. I spent some time sort of thinking about how it would sit, and it was like a bunch of the notes on the D flat are from altered dominant. Like I have the flat 9, the flat 13 in there, and and what the heck else? Flat 5. And sharp 9. You see, so you hear, I found a way to get a bunch of, like, the first 9 notes, all, pretty much everything fits with the chord. The only thing that's not really matched up with the chord is that A. I have one A on the D, but that's pretty damn good, right? So it's like, you know what I mean? So you try and find... this would be an example that's not an arpeggio. I guess that's why I bring that. So you find whatever group of notes you have and try and line them up with it. We good? Okay, I should probably get rolling too. So, anybody, any last question?
Yeah, so do you practice to sing through these changes when you practice?
Well, I practice the changes the normal way, and then I take, what I did is I took this, and then so first I get familiar with moving around through, let's say, the cycle of fifths here. Then I'm like, can I make these notes line up with the chords? And there's this trippy thing. There, any of you know this trick about if you have a 2-5-1, you play minor pentatonics going up in half steps. There's anyhow there anyhow there's certain patterns that show up, and what I could do is I should just show you. Here, I'm going to do the cycle of fifths, 5 notes at a time, starting on B. Oops. Uh-oh. This guy died on me. So, they're just these weird patterns that just are. I know it sounds sort of weird, but here's like. Hey, what happened? Sorry. So now here's the cycle of this, and then there's this crazy thing is that the first 5 notes spells G major pentatonic, the next 5 spells A flat minor pentatonic, the next 5 A major pentatonic, and then B flat major pentatonic. And this will work over a 2-5-1-6. And what it is this altered dominant pentatonic on those. And then here's and then I can improvise off those scales. E minor pentatonic. The F sharp. G minor pentatonic. So that's anyhow. There's a little bit of an explanation. So there really is like you look for these patterns, and then you can sort of extend them. Does that make some sense? Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate this. I have to teach at 3, so I've got to roll. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you all coming out. I know it's such a busy time of the year, and thanks for spending your time here when I know you've got a lot to do. One more time. See, there's a lot of beauty in these patterns. I just say that it's like looking in a kaleidoscope. Thank you so much.